Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Jim Fogarty. But before we talk to Jim, I've got an exciting announcement to make because that is, I, along with Jim as well, am a part of a landscape and garden design course. The course is run by a company called Ulleo, Ulleo, and they do other courses as well, which I found quite interesting. So there's one on psychology and mental health. There's one I'm looking to potentially get my daughter to have a look at in interior design. There's one they didn't ask me to be a part of in beauty, which I'm not sure why, but they did ask me to be part of the landscape and garden design course. And I wasn't too sure about it when I first was approached because I've got my landscaping course coming up. But then the more I looked into it, not only have they got some phenomenal people involved with it, but it's going to work well in conjunction with what I'm doing in construction. And they weren't getting me to talk so much about design, more about construction and how that works with design. To give you an idea of the quality of the people involved in the course, who you'd be learning from doing the course, there's Jim Fogarty, as I mentioned, Steve Taylor from Cos Design, Matt Leesey from Land Art, Bethany Williamson, there's myself, Andrew Smith from Warners, Dave Gelch from Coolabah Turf, so he's a farm manager at Coolabah, talking about turf, Nick Garnham from Jardin. There's one of the modules is about exterior styling as well. Dave Ritter from Atelier 10, because one of them is about sustainability and land management. And then Glenn McCarness is a mentor for the course as well. So, I've often looked at landscaping courses and love the idea of certain designers doing a course so you can learn how that designer thinks about a design. And now this course has got all those people involved within the one course. So I think there's 60 hours of content in it. It's all online at your own pace, so you don't have to be anywhere at a particular time. And it's targeted at the same people I'm targeting my course at, which is DIY people, but also people within the industry who are wanting to add a string to their bow, and whether they're doing maintenance and construction and want to do a little bit of design or get a better understanding of it. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is not only being part of it, but there is a discount code that you get by listening to the landscaping podcast. So you can save actual money if you're wanting to do the course by using a coupon code, which is landscaping podcast. So just one word. So I think the course, if you pay up front, is $1,595. If you don't want to pay up front, there's a payment plan you can do. But you'll save $400 if you use the coupon code landscaping podcast. Doesn't matter if you use all capitals or small letters. As long as one word, save some money. So that's the biggest. I think I might have done one type of coupon code in the past, but I can't remember what it was. Didn't get used once. I know that much. But yeah, this is the first one where you can save actual money for it, $400. So, and not only you save money, but it's also an awesome course with awesome people involved in it. So yeah, very excited to be a part of that. So you'll probably hear that mentioned in the future again. And one day within the next 3 to 4 years, I'll have my landscaping course ready as well. So it'll be a good thing to have in conjunction with that. But yeah, as I mentioned, Jim is part of that. So we'll get on to his episode. And it's another episode I love doing because that's the first time I've spoken to Jim. Never had, so there's some people I've met before and yet like they wouldn't remember that they met me or vice versa. But legitimately have never met Jim before. But yeah, got on extremely well with him, spoke for a lot longer than what the podcast episode goes for. So I certainly enjoyed talking to him. And I loved, he's another person who went to Burnley. He didn't initially get the marks out of school to get into Burnley, but was really keen to go there. So persisted with it and then ended up getting in there. And then he was there with Paul Pritchard, Joe Ferguson, and a couple of other superstars. So again, every person who goes there, they're always got other people who have been successful. So it was a great place to go back in the day. And then after he finished there, he started his business and ended up doing a lot of garden shows since then. So I think he's been to might have been to maybe 5 or 6 countries doing garden shows. So he's done Melbourne. And he went to Chelsea a couple of times, won a silver gilt the first time and then got gold the second time. So, and he talks about, the challenges of that and using, could he use Australian plants, all Australian plants. He's been to Singapore and Philadelphia garden shows as well. And South Korea, I think he said. So very well travelled and experienced person, particularly in garden shows. There's a bit of chat about that in the episode, and he was also one of the designers on Backyard Blitz back in the day. So yeah, plenty to talk about with Jim, and I absolutely love chatting with him. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Jim Fogarty. Well, Jim, thank you for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
How do I start? So when I left school, I actually had no idea what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, I'll join the Army Reserves. So I did that for a few years, and that was brilliant. So that gave me a good sort of background to the bush, living in the bush. But also, I think because a lot of the stuff you're doing, I was in the infantry in the reserves, and you're not allowed torches, no fires, and everything. So your senses become a lot more aware of your surroundings. And we spent time in the Northern Territory, and I just absolutely loved it. Just the natural landscape. There'd be fires burning wild around the place, and that really struck a chord with me. And then a mate of mine was enrolling at Burnley, and he sort of dragged me down to check it out. And I thought it sounded all right, working outdoors and sort of connecting with nature again. So, and I did enrolled at Burnley. I think after the first semester, he failed and was sort of thrown out, and I stuck with it and really appreciate it. It was really good.
Did you go there at the same time as any other superstars? Because it seems like everyone who went there turned out, except your mate, turned out to be like awesome in the industry.
Yeah, well, I think my mate ended up in catering and became a very good caterer, believe it or not. Yeah, I was there. Paul Pritchard, the
All right.
same year as me.
Yeah.
There was Julian McCarthy. Do you
Yeah.
know Julian
Yeah.
McCarthy? John Bott, who builds a lot of my projects, was there at the time. Yeah, there was a lot of people. Joe
Yeah.
Ferguson, who's
Yep.
a pretty well-known garden designer. Yeah, there was quite a lot actually in that era. And Ian Winston was our landscape lecturer, and he was a fantastic guy, really good teacher of landscape construction and design and things like that. So there was definitely a good generation that came out of that time at Burnley. I've got a lot of time for Burnley.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating the amount of people I talk to who've been there, and I'll say who else was there at the same time, and it's just a who's who of people
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
knows.
absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people.
So, and how long were you there for?
I did the associate diploma, so it was 2 years full time,
Yep. And then
and
went to,
majored in landscape design and construction. And while I was there, I was working for Jenny Smith Gardens in as a landscaper, a landscape labourer back then. Jenny Smith was probably one of the early kind of designers in Melbourne. There was Jenny Smith, there was Jenny Walker, I remember at the time. Rick Eckersley was pretty early days starting out. Paul Bango's pretty early days starting out. So the design industry back then was really controlled by females. So that was my kind of grounding. And I worked for Jenny Smith's son, Andrew Seckel, when the business, there was like four of us in the early days of Jenny Smith Gardens. Yeah. So that was my grounding. But then I moved to Cairns for a year and worked in tropical horticulture, commercial landscaping. I was a landscape maintenance supervisor for a commercial company up in Cairns for a year, which was, again, really good experience and a good introduction to tropical horticulture, completely different to Melbourne.
yeah.
All the paving up there was all on screeded sand, and there was no paving on mortar or anything like that. It was very different. So I really loved that. That was a really good experience.
So were you paving on mortar even in the early days when you with Jenny Smith?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was
All right.
always compacted crushed rock and
Yeah.
mortar. It was never on concrete slabs
Yep.
in the early days. And all those paving jobs lasted though.
Yeah.
You
And what
know,
sort of pavers were you using?
a lot of Flagstone. Do you remember that company down in
No.
Seaford? There was a company called Flagstone Pavers, and that they were eating a bit back then. They were probably one of the only suppliers of manufactured, concrete product. But they were a really good product actually, Flagstone. I don't believe they exist anymore.
Yep. And then so you came back to Melbourne after Cairns?
Came back to Melbourne, yeah, and while I was up there, I started writing for the Cairns Post. So that was my sort of foray into gardening media side of things as well, which was really good. I actually did a certificate of journalism up there. My girlfriend at the time worked in the media, and she sort of encouraged me a bit. And then I actually had a little bit of a sideshow into the TV world after that, on Channel 10 as sort of a gardening person on daytime TV. Yeah.
Oh,
And then came back to Melbourne, got back into construction, and did that for a few years. And I did the Melbourne Flower Show, yeah, a couple of times. And then I think I met Martin Semken at MIFGS. This would have been early 2000s. And one year he sort of said to me, because I was finding it hard doing build and design. And I knew in my mind I actually really wanted to go down the path of designing. And he suggested to me, look, why don't I buy all your gear? I didn't have much gear, probably a beaten up old ute and a crowbar or something. And you design and we'll build, sort of thing. I'm forever grateful to Martin actually for that. And we did a lot of work together for a while back then, and did gardens at the Melbourne Flower Show together, and through that partnership and with Mark Bence as well, we ended up taking that sort of first garden to the Chelsea Flower Show in 2004. So that was really good sort of journey.
so how much planning was involved in doing that?
In hindsight, probably not enough, because we'd won Best in Show 2003 at MIFGS, and Wes Fleming sort of suggested, what's next? Why don't we take it to Chelsea Flower Show? So it was all on a bit of a whim, and it ended up being sort of part of a promotional exercise for the Melbourne Flower Show as well, to internationally, sort of thing. So it ended up being myself designer, Semken as the contractor, Flemings with the wholesale sponsor. But we got all these companies donating, Sherlock donated wheelbarrows and tools, and we literally just packed everything into, I think, 2 shipping containers, and shipped it over there, and then unpacked it all and built this garden. But we didn't have enough lead time really for plants. Plants was really difficult because we couldn't obviously ship any plants from Australia. We had to source everything in the UK. So I mean, MIFGS is March, and we did Chelsea the year after in May. So, it was only a year max, even a little bit less. It's not enough. You need 2 years.
Had you been to Chelsea before that?
No, no. Our first time was going over to do a recce, and yeah, it was a real eye opener. Yeah, very daunting.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
daunting. Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing though, absolutely amazing to see it all. We had Julian Dow had been judging at MIFGS, and he was a very well-known designer, English designer, and we were lucky that he kind of enabled us to get on. So we helped him do his sell-off on the garden that he did in 2003, an incredible garden, and that was a huge eye-opener for us, seeing just the amount of effort, money, and detail that goes into the gardens there. But we sort of scrounged together everything for our garden, and it was a really good exercise. We got a silver gilt, which was pretty good effort for first
Yeah.
time. But I look back and see how amateur we were. But that's kind of a nice thing though, And the thing was that all the English really loved us. They loved our banter and humor. We were all there. We made a lot of friends, all of us. We were quite an engaging group, as all Australians are. And that was the thing I think that struck a chord with them over there. And it probably opened a few doors, generally for the Australian industry to go back again and again, which was a good thing.
Yeah, because it was year after year for a while that Flemings were doing that was sponsoring it.
Yeah, yeah. So then they took other designers back. But I did manage to go back separately 2011 with the Botanic Gardens, Royal Botanic Gardens, Melbourne, and did a garden on the main avenue, there was the first time an Australian had done a garden on the main avenue. So it was one of the big gardens, had great support of the Botanic Gardens and Botanic Gardens staff. That was fantastic exercise. Yeah, and that got a gold medal. So that was really good.
And a bit more planning involved in that one.
2 years that one. Yeah, I
Yep.
knew I knew what was. I knew a bit more about what we were up for then. So 2 years, much bigger budget. We had a lot of support from companies and donors and things like that because people wanted to promote the Botanic Gardens. So that was really good. That was good. Good fun.
So yeah, like were you getting a lot more plants as well, like sourcing them from all over the place? Because you
Yeah,
used a lot of Australian plants, was that right in that one?
yeah, all Australian plants.
Yeah.
And we sent some seed, rare and threatened seed, which were raised over there. But most of the plants are sourced in Spain and Sicily, believe it or not. There's some
Oh,
really huge nurseries that you can't walk around. You have to be driven in vehicles. There's a nursery in Spain that has their own hotel on site. So, you go down and plant source and stay in their accommodation, and yeah, it's just incredible, really, really incredible. But their markets like Africa and Mediterranean, massive market. So it's interesting seeing, you can buy Australian plants in bigger pot sizes than you can here. That was incredible.
yeah, it makes more sense that they'd be available there rather than in England because the
Yeah,
climate
yeah,
is
that's
not
right.
similar.
Then they all get trucked up. But the thing with Chelsea is you don't know what the weather's going to be like. So for each plant you need, you're basically buying three plants. Yeah, so you're buying for uh flowering 1 week early, flowering spot on for judging week, and flowering of 1 week late, depending on what the weather's going to be. So you're ordering, 300% the amount of plants that you need, and then you've got the ability to pick and choose on the day if the right sort of bud development for flowering for that moment of judging. Yeah,
And is it a borrowing plants or are you buying them?
buying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And then
no,
just going to sell them
nothing.
off.
Everyone buys at Chelsea. I think it's every year, and there's RHS shows right through the calendar. So nurseries would go broke over there
Yep.
if they were lending all the time. But it's all really driven by sponsors, corporate sponsors. So it's all big business. Each garden's promoting some sort of charity or business. There's a business case behind each garden and designers representing those corporate brands. So, you've got a role speaking to the media as well as designing a garden, hopefully getting a good result as well.
Did you meet the Queen when you were there the second time?
Yeah, and the first time.
Oh,
Yeah, twice. Yeah. Second time we'd both grade a little bit.
no.
But yeah, and that was incredible, I've got to say. But the thing I think that especially when we first met her, with the four of us, it was myself, Martin Semkin, Mark Benson, Wes Fleming, and we were briefed. It's all pre-arranged, yeah, because we'd come from Australia. They organised that we'd be receiving Her Majesty, but they come and we had a protocol person come and sort of tell us what to call her and don't touch her, and they were a little bit worried because we're from Australia. And Paul Keating had famously put his arm around Her Majesty a few years prior, yeah. And then they bring the bomb squad through, and the show's completely empty except for those who are meeting the Queen, and you got these royal passes. So we're just standing there, and you're in suits and everything, and all of a sudden this little entourage comes up, and there's the Queen. It's just, and they say there's a percentage of people that just freeze and they literally can't speak. But yeah, it was absolutely kind of really bizarre experience. But she was really nice and engaged and very interested in the plants and just completely curious as to the fact that we'd traveled all the way from Australia to exhibit there. She thought that was just brilliant.
Yeah, she'd love her gardens.
Yeah, yeah, very. And I developed a huge respect for her because it must be really hard work for her. But she seems so genuinely interested all the time, and that's something I just find really incredible. Yeah,
Yes, yeah, especially for that to do it that long, like every day,
that's right.
showing that to different people.
Yeah.
So after you're doing it the first time, when you came back, did you had your reputation increased from it?
I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, possibly, but it's I sincerely don't think it really changes your business in any way though. And a lot of people say this, but it can be detrimental to your business because people sort of assume that you're going to be more expensive or
Yep.
too busy, and it's just not the case. So that's one thing I probably took away from it is just being humble and not letting it change you because it shouldn't change you, and it really doesn't change you.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless it's going to make you appreciate things a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's more about the friendships you make and the experiences
Yeah.
rather than just results and things like that. Yeah.
So what did you do after coming back from that? Were you then just doing 100% design?
Just designing. That's right. Just designing. And uh and then I think Melbourne had that, remember that drought in 2005?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they banned irrigation of lawns and things
Yeah.
like that, which sort of created a little mini recession in the garden industry. And then at that time, I actually got into 3D technology with designing and realized that I could be more efficient designing on my own without staff using, just better technology. ArchiCAD is the software I use. And and I also realized with traveling that it's just much easier not to have staff. So I've never had staff since then. It's so much better. So I can just literally, lock up the office and go overseas for a project, and I don't have to worry about other people. I just worry about myself. And the other benefit is, and I look at other design businesses that have, I don't know, 6 or 8 staff or something. They've got to sell so many projects to feed those staff. Whereas for me, one job might be a month. Some jobs might be 4 months for me on my own. So, in a year, if I do 10 designs, that's me done for the year generally.
Yeah, right.
And that's quite manageable. And I really enjoy that. And it's me working with the client. I'm not handballing it to a staff member or anything that so I can put the detail in it. And that's something I enjoy.
Yeah, yeah. I often spend a bit of time thinking about that, about wondering why people do certain things. Because yeah, when you're working by yourself, you're the most profitable you're going to be. And
Absolutely, yeah.
it's like, and I think it might be people not wanting to say no to people, so they're getting all these inquiries, so they want to put on more work, more employees to do the work. But yeah, the profitability just goes down the more people you have.
Yeah, I'm not sure why either. And I've wondered, is it a drive to earn more money or you know what I mean? But I don't know the answer. But for me, I'm more interested in designing gardens, so it works better for me that I'm doing it, and I don't need staff to do that.
Now, when you first started doing designs, how did you go about charging enough for it, or did you not at the start, and then you realized you need to charge more for it, or something you learned early?
I'm still going through that, Joel. Yeah, that's hard. In I was. Do you remember there's a TV show, Backyard Blitz?
Absolutely, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's got me into landscaping. I loved it.
Okay, so I was the Victorian designer for the show, yeah, and I was
Right.
working for Don Burke for quite a while and wrote for his magazine and things like that. But Burke's Backyard, I was off camera, mind you. I wasn't, I was just a slapper doing the designs for the Victorian shows. But it was a fantastic show, and it really made gardening, especially I think with Jamie Jury hosting it, whatever. It brought a bit of it just changed the whole brand of gardens and garden design and garden creation from being a daggy sort of retirees pastime to all of a sudden it's kind of young and funky and cool and sassy and it really changed the whole landscape in Melbourne. Now, I know it did in every state really. But what I'm getting at is that the show had a certain design fee for designers, and it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a fair amount of money, and they looked after people very well. It was very professionally run. But that sort of gave me an idea of what to be charging for other clients, and but it's never easy. It's never easy, and when you're starting out, of course, you're only charging what you're worth, which is maybe not a lot. Whereas nowadays, with the cost of running a business, that's pretty hard.
Mm. Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle because it's such a job that you can love doing. So it's easier to do things and not charge for them than what you would if you were, collecting garbage or something or doing some other job that
Mm.
not many people would enjoy. It's such a passion that people actually get paid for.
Now, that's a good point. And frustratingly, I think a lot of people do it kind of as a side hobby, which is great on one hand, but it's difficult for those that need to earn money to feed family
Yeah.
because you're putting a fee in for X amount of dollars, but then someone else putting a fee in for a quarter of your fee, and it's really hard to keep the industry professional like that. I find.
Yeah, it's been the same in construction where people starting out have got so much less overheads than what an existing business has got. Like an existing business might have a shed and machinery and trucks, so they're paying the insurance and leases on all that. Whereas someone else starting out might have one employee and they just meet at his house where he's got all his tool in the garage. So they can be doing the
And a
same.
sandwich press or something.
Oh, everyone's got
Yeah.
them, yeah. It was the more expensive business has got a microwave in their trailer compared to
Yeah.
the sandwich press.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but yeah, just they could be doing the same quality of work, but they don't need to charge as much. So it's yeah, so it can be harder for the people who are in the with more employees to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's very hard. And look, the thing over the years, I've sort of developed my own fee proposal, and I've got it pretty well fine-tuned now. So I try and have stages of the design. So when you reach a stage and you can deliver that plan, you can then invoice and then move on to the next plan. So in a plan, I'll have maybe 8 plans in a project,
Right.
you know.
And you
Um,
do all the 3D stuff yourself?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know that's surprising when you look at me, but no,
That's
no,
good.
I do.
It's yeah, it's a rare thing these days that people are doing it themselves because a lot of people are subcontracting it out.
No, that's right. Yeah, yeah. But I do it all myself. Yeah. I got into ArchiCAD, as I say, it was 2006, and I've been with it ever since. It's quite expensive program, but it's so powerful. It's incredible. And there's a lot of stuff with AI coming out now, and yeah, it's amazing. I don't know if you use it at all, but
No, I've heard of it, but I've never actually looked into it at all.
a lot
Um,
of good architects are on it.
yeah.
And it's just so you're actually designing more in 3D rather than just 2D on paper. So it's more enjoyable as a process of designing,
And
I
how do you go
find.
converting it to being able to be like plans that people can quote off?
Yeah, so it does that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything you're creating, you can schedule materials. So it's incredible software. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And talking about AI, I'm fascinated to see how that affects the design industry. So I think that's one that can be heavily affected where people will be able to sort of do their own designs and they won't have as much knowledge or anything as what an actual designer will to start off with. But I can see that having an impact going forward.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Especially with conceptual design and ideas. It could be really beneficial, but there could be some liabilities with. I can imagine going to see clients and they're just presenting these AI sort of rendered images. This is what I want. And you're like, oh my God, that'll be $1.5 million, and
Yeah.
you've got a budget of $15,000.
Yeah, or it happens now with showing like images of plants that they want. Like they're all from tropical Queensland, so that's not going to work down here in Victoria. So
That's
it's
right. Well,
changing it a bit.
it's hard getting plants in Victoria, isn't it?
Well, that's I was doing that the seconds before we are coming on here. I'm trying to get some plants, so I'm getting some from New South Wales because I can't find the ones because I've got to get 80 of the one variety
Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah,
advanced ones.
it's very hard. The growing side of the industry, I sort of feel like it's out of kilter with the design and landscape side a little bit. And I don't know, maybe the growers are growing more for the big box stores, but yeah, I don't know. I just wish the right hand and left hand would meet in the middle a bit
I
better
think it's
there.
I think it took a massive hit at COVID where everyone started spending a lot more on their gardens, and that's what I noticed. A lot more plants were harder to get around that time.
Yeah,
And then it's so hard it's like because plants take so long to grow, and we haven't it hasn't been warm for like 3 years. I feel like a consistent warmth.
Yeah.
So like plants grow slow, and everyone wants advanced stuff. So yeah, but when you think of how long it takes to grow it, like these hedges that I'm getting, and I'm buying 80 of them, and then they're off the market. So how many people are doing that? So it makes
No,
sense
that's
that
right.
people grow
Absolutely.
things
Yeah.
so quick. And I've
I
seen a lot
mean,
of sort of backyard people starting to grow their own plants as well because they can see that like a gap in the market.
well,
Uh,
there's I, I think Nathan Burkett's growing his own plants now,
there are.
which is interesting. You know, designers are starting to basically become wholesale growers.
Yeah.
So that may be the change that we'll see in the future. But I find it hard that where councils are requiring specific like indigenous plants in certain pot sizes, and yet you can't buy them, and
Yeah.
no one's growing them. That's something I find really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. Even some design specifications like there's like because well, I'm in Geelong and there'll be some Melbourne designers doing the design and I'll specify like certain concrete mixes from a concrete plant in Melbourne. Like, well, that's not possible, so you can't do that. And
What?
like you
Because
say,
is that because you don't use cement in your mixes down at Geelong?
no, because it does we don't we're a bit more laid back, so I don't like it to be too hard the
And it's
concrete.
too hard to demolish, right?
Exactly. You have to do it anyway. So but yeah, like yeah, you can barely get a 6-inch pot with an indigenous plant, let alone 8 inches that they're asking for
That's
sometimes.
right. Yeah, very difficult. Very
Yeah,
difficult.
but that's yeah. I don't know what the reason is behind that doing that sort of thing. It's people who don't really they might have a qualification, but they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was speaking of qualifications. There's I got pretty excited when I got asked to be part of a course a landscape design course. So the company Ulleo contacted me saying, "I was just wondering if you'd be interested in doing this landscape design course." I said, "I'm not really sure that my skills are there to be able to teach people landscape design." And they said, "Oh, we've got Jim Fogarty, Matt Lisi, and Steve Taylor as part of it." So I said, "I'm definitely not in the same echelon as those three." But yeah, so I'm talking about it in construction. So when did you find out about the interest of Ulleo doing the landscape design course? Because I think it's an awesome. I love the idea of it. Bethany Williamson's part of it as well. Andrew Smith from Warners is talking about plants.
Yeah.
There's Dave from Coolabah Turf as well. There's just like an all-star cast of people, and you can learn a little bits from all of them.
And the mentor, Claire McCarness, who's
Yeah,
a really talented young designer in Melbourne.
yeah, she was part of
Yeah.
I think when she was working at Exley, the three of them won Best in Show at the Garden Show as well.
That's right. Yeah. So I designed a garden for a client who loves Australian plants, right? Very talented plantswoman in her own right. And it's her son that runs Ulleo, yeah.
All
So
right.
that's how the connection came about. And so they spoke to me about the idea of doing a garden design course. The premise of it is, and it came off the back of COVID, that people were looking to maybe change careers or do short courses, more introductory courses. So it's not like replacing, say, Burnley or proper landscape architecture courses. It's more for people who want to dip their toes, or for people that want to maybe do their own garden at home and they want to do a course to build some skill base to do that project, or maybe for contractors that want to upskill or maybe shift into garden design or from maintenance into design. So that's sort of the idea of it. But it's very clever in that what they do is kind of produce a bit like a TV show, and then you can log in your own time. So if you wanted, you could log in at 2 a.m. and do your own study in your own time. And I think that's pretty clever because I think nowadays people don't want to be in a regimented classroom scenario of having to log in at 9 o'clock, finish at 4 o'clock or whatever, 1 hour for lunch. They want to do it to suit their lifestyle. So that's how it came about. So the fundamentals course, which is the introductory course, is there online. And the idea is at some point, probably next year, that I'll develop more of a master's garden design course with them. So sort of dive a bit deeper into topics and the thought process of design and using plants and things like that, as well as doing like little master classes, probably with people like yourself, and tackle different topics from construction or turf, growing plants, with Andrew Smith from Warner's, and as well as design, illustrating with Bethany Williamson and Claire McCarness, and sort of tackling all those different little topics that you cover in design, which I think is very exciting.
Yeah, like I wouldn't have been a part of it if I wasn't that excited about it. But I like when you mentioned those names, and that's one of the things I love about people doing the design courses, is you can find a designer you like and learn from them the way they do it, rather than just asking a question every now and then on an Instagram post where you don't get that much feedback from them. Whereas
Yeah.
this is they're actually teaching you certain elements of it, and I wouldn't do an online course if you had set times that you had to do it because I want to do it when I can. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's what I'd be like too, because
yeah.
my attention span's very limited. You know?
And yeah, everyone's just so busy, so you don't have time to be able to set a certain like to have a meeting on a certain time. You want to do
Yeah.
it, you might want to do it after work. So, and
And you might want to actually replay something and
yeah,
listen to it 6 times to really get that information. But the other thing is that, because they've been filming at Steve Taylor's gardens and Matt Lacey up in Sydney, and, with myself and other Bethany Williamson as well. So, they're actually getting some pretty good footage and background of different designers, which I think is really clever.
yeah, and it's designed, it's marketed at the same people who I'm marketing my course at, and that's people who are like DIY or maintenance or contractors who can sort of upskill.
Yeah.
And if they like, if you're these people who are maintenance or contractors, then they can do it after work, and so yeah, couldn't talk more highly of it. And I mentioned there's a discount as well. I'm pretty also excited about because I don't have many discount codes
Oh,
left.
I heard you've struck a deal there, Joel. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
This
there's
is
a
a first.
saving of $400
Is
if
that
they
a
use the coupon code Landscaping
how
Podcast.
much?
$400 off
You
the
sure?
yeah
Is that Aussie dollar?
AUD. Yep.
Jeez,
It's not 399. It's 400.
that's pretty good deal.
Yeah. So I think it's if you pay up front, it's 19.95. So 400 off that, 15.95. Yeah, access to all those people we mentioned. So yeah.
I'll have to
Um,
check that out.
Hope you didn't buy it without the coupon code.
That's right.
Um, because I saw you've also been to Singapore Garden Show. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when Singapore first developed their show, they got me over to do a garden in their Botanic Gardens in Singapore to help launch the show. Yeah.
When was that? You reckon?
Uh 2005.
All right.
2005, because just before I got married. And then I've done 5 of the shows since. Yeah.
And was it every 2 years from the start?
Yeah, it was every 2 years, and it was indoors at Suntec Convention Centre to start with, which was really difficult. They wanted everyone to ship plants in from their own countries. Yeah, so
Right.
I think I flew a batch of plants from Warner's one year, in fact. And yeah, that was really stressful stuff. But then you got plants inside, in dark, yeah, low light conditions, and so it comes with a lot of challenges like that. But and then the last few years they took it out to Gardens by the Bay, and that was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. The only downside was the rain, because when it rains in Singapore, it really really hammers. But at least it's hot, and
Yeah.
and it's quite nice actually in the rain there, even when you're working.
Yeah. I,
It's not too bad.
I went over just to check it out in 2015, and yeah, it was phenomenal. Just loved the place, and Gardens by the Bay, just an insane place.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And all the nurseries are right out around the periphery of the island. And because they're in the sort of the rural parts of Singapore Island, you've also got the RAF bases out there. So you'd be at big tree nurseries and things. And all the landscape contractors have massive wholesale nurseries because they do
Right.
quite big projects, and they bring trees down from Malaysia, and they're massive setups. They've got like 100 staff, and Very different to here, very different. But you'd be out there in nurseries, you'd have all these jet fighters taking off, behind the fence line, and just so exotic over there. I love working in Singapore.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds similar to Japan. There's a few like landscape companies there who've got their own nurseries as well, and they've got rock yards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've competed in Japan a few times too.
Yeah. How was that?
It was great. Yeah, I've done three garden shows over there, I think, in Shizuoka Prefecture and down in Nagasaki. So the World Garden Competition and the Gardening World Cup, they call
Yep.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I spoke to Ross Ubigan. He did that one year and got
yeah, he did it after me.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right.
Was that a barrel of fun for you as well there?
Japan's, yeah, fantastic. I actually take garden tours now
Yeah.
with a company, Australians Studying Abroad, believe it or not. We started from a university lecturer who took students overseas and they'd study while they travelled. So I take tours, two tours a year to Japan, autumn and spring for cherry
Yeah.
blossom,
Yeah.
which is great because I was able to, use the experience of working over there with Japanese contractors because the contractors are amazing in Japan. They're so good at their craft, really, really so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really enjoy that. I've learned a lot more about Japanese gardens. I see a big parallel between Japanese garden design and Australian, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's like even if you look at indigenous culture in Australia and the Shinto belief in Japan, there's a lot of parallels with their beliefs and their stories and respecting nature, mountains and rocks and trees and things like that. And I think that's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, we helped build the at the Melbourne Garden Show the garden that Ross did with Yosuke Yamaguchi. So
All right,
he
yeah,
also did a one at Singapore as prior to that, and that was fascinating to see and how meticulous they were with their rock work, just turning it half a degree so it was right. So
yeah.
yeah, they were amazing to watch work.
He's a very naughty man, that Yamaguchi-san.
He does enjoy himself a bit.
He's a character. He's a good guy.
Yeah. So did you know him at Singapore or even before?
Yeah, Singapore. Yep, Singapore, and it's hard to remember where
Yeah.
you sort of bump into a lot of these people at various garden shows, and develop really good friendships with them. It's a great network out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I feel like it's catching up with family when I go back to the garden show again.
Yeah,
So have you are there any like you've done the Hampton Court Palace as well? Is there any
yep.
garden shows that you haven't done that you'd like to have?
Uh, Not really. Not really. I mean, I haven't exhibited in China, but politically, obviously, a lot of issues in China, isn't there? So I'm quite happy that I haven't, if you know what I mean.
I think Phil Withers did a garden there and they just leave it there. Like it's not they're not temporary, they're show gardens.
Well, yeah, I've got a garden in Japan and Korea like that.
Yeah.
I've done one in South Korea, believe it or not. And I've done the Philadelphia Flower Show. I think I'm the only Australian to have done a garden at Philadelphia in the States, and that was a really good experience.
How was that? How'd that show compare to the other? Because I looked into doing one overseas, and that was one of the ones I looked at.
Yeah, right. I believe Philadelphia is the oldest show in the world.
Yeah, right.
I think. It was indoors, but snowing outside. A completely bizarre experience for me, but had a lot of fun. Like the contractors are really nice, funny guys. So much banter. They love Australians, and yeah, had a great time. It was good fun. They have a theme though. They have a theme for the show,
Yeah.
and the year I did it, it was the movies, and I did a Mad Max garden, which was really good fun. We had like 44-gallon drums of fuel and fires burning and just this really sort of industrial kind of design, It was a lot of fun, car tires and stuff like that.
The fires would have
Yeah.
gone down well indoors.
Um, yeah, it was fake fire, fake fire. But they ended up getting Disney on board as a sponsor, so I wasn't able to tell anyone it was Mad Max.
It's not
That
one of
was,
theirs.
yeah, they had to guess what it was or something. It was very funny.
You haven't done the board by Bloom in Ireland?
No. Are you going to do that, are you?
No, probably not. No, I think I might be retired. I haven't got any money for garden shows. No one will pay me to go and do one.
I don't think anyone will pay anyone anymore.
Yeah, it's probably not getting any easier.
I think sadly COVID's probably changed a lot of garden shows too. And in some ways, I think people probably question, like I feel like Chelsea's lost a bit of its spark
It's certainly been
since
going
COVID.
through a bit of a changing process.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the sad side of it is I think people are questioning the amount of money spent on building temporary
Mm.
gardens. But anyway, hopefully that will correct itself at
Yeah, they're
some
certainly
point.
moving towards a more sustainable way of doing things as much as possible.
Yeah. And I don't know what the future will be, but anyway.
What's the last one you did?
Would have been Singapore 2018 with Andy Sturgeon.
Uh,
See, that's 6 years ago now.
yeah, doesn't feel that long, but
Uh,
yeah, it is.
I had black hair then.
Are you just getting all your work from word of mouth at the moment? Like, or do you do any advertising or anything?
Um, I've done probably more social media this year than I've ever done because I feel like I've sort of fallen behind a bit with that with COVID and everything. But I've actually a lot of my work is on the peninsula, the Mornington Peninsula, southeast of Melbourne. And I think since COVID, a lot of people were buying acreage, leaving Melbourne. So I was getting a lot of work sort of creating quite large Australian plant-based gardens on the peninsula. But now with land tax, a lot of that's kind of stopped a bit now.
Mm.
Yeah, so every shift you make, you sort of run into a brick wall a bit, I think, out there. But yeah, interesting times now, I think, in Victoria. There's not much money in Victoria now.
Yeah, hearing that a bit. I think the Emmeline and Liam, who won all the awards at the Garden Show this year, I think they said there was some politician who came and spoke to them and said, "Oh, it's a bad year to win this because we haven't got any money to be sharing out for projects or something along that
Yeah,
line." But yeah,
it
it's,
sounds like Victorian government won't have money for maybe not in our lifetime.
they all gave it all out during COVID,
Yeah.
so now I've got to pay for it back. Do you do any mentoring or anything like that for any other designers? Have you done that in the past?
Yeah, I don't officially do it, but I very happily because we're talking earlier when I went to Burnley, but when I left school in 1988, and Burnley was really popular at the time. It was actually very difficult to get into, and I didn't have enough points in my HSC score to get into Burnley. So I pestered Dr. Peter May, Burnley, kept ringing, not pestered, but kept ringing him. I really wanted to get into the course. I had a couple of years in the Army Reserves, and I was ready to actually start studying and looking at a career path. And it was on third round offers because someone had pulled out that Dr. Peter May rang me and said, "Look, there's a spot available if you want." And I've never forgotten that. I'm always very grateful to that opportunity because the thing is with designing gardens and building gardens and growing plants, it's not about how well you do at school. It's more about the passion and creativity and the skill, yeah, and the want and drive and the ambition and the care factor and the detail and things like that. So I've never forgotten that. So I'm always very happy to give my time to young people or students doing assignments and things like that. I had someone just before messaging me on Instagram asking for advice on what to charge with something, and always very happily give people my thoughts. It might be pretty ordinary advice sometimes, but I think it's an important part of all of our role in the industry. And that's why I'm doing this thing with Ulleo, with the online courses, because for all the knowledge that you've got, Joel, and myself, and everyone else in the industry, there's no point in having that knowledge if we don't share it and we don't mentor younger people coming through because we all care about this industry. I think, that's how I perceive it. So, I think it's one of the most important roles we've all got is to share our knowledge and help foster younger people coming through so that when we retire and I'm being pushed around in a wheelchair, that I can feel comfortable and proud of the next generation and what they're achieving. Because I'm sure they'll do it much better and bigger than we are.
Yep. So when someone does ask you how like advice on how much to charge when they're starting out, what do you say to them?
Well, firstly, I tell them what my charge out rate is for the advice.
Yep.
No, I don't. I'm only joking.
Oh,
What the advice of how much to charge? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
How
Because
much to charge? Yeah. Well, look, with design, I've always had this. Remember when glass pool fences were just everyone wanted a glass pool fence in their backyard pool? Yeah.
yeah.
And this is probably 15 years ago now. Everyone was putting a pool in as well, which is probably not so common nowadays. But they'd happily spend 15, 16 grand on a glass pool fence, but they would complain about $2,000 for garden design or, $10,000 for garden design or whatever. So I always had this sort of theory that if people are prepared to spend 15 grand on a glass pool fence, they should be spending the same on a garden design. But you've got to obviously back that up with,
Mm.
you've got to quantify that. But yeah, and that's why I follow a process. I don't just do one concept plan. I'll do a master plan. I'll do a setup plan for the contractors on site. I try and document everything properly. I'll do a lighting plan, do a really detailed planning plan, always at 1 to 50 scale. So that might be two plans for one residential house or something like that. So, the more detail you put in, you've got to get recompensed financially for that. But really, if a client balks at a design fee, they're not going to be happy with the construction budget, are they?
No. No.
And the other thing, every job, I always get a land surveyor in as the first process in the design process, yeah. And if a client balks at the fee to pay for a survey, you know that the project's not going to go anywhere.
Well, they're a couple of grand, aren't they, at least?
I've had surveys that have been 10 grand just for the land survey, yeah. So it's a fair upfront cost for a client, but you know that they're serious if they get a land survey done. The thing is now with all the permit requirements, you have to get one anyway. You're mad not to get a land survey done. And the other thing with liabilities, if you don't have a land survey done, and if you hand measure a job and you get a measurement wrong, all the liability's on you. And I think you just got to be smart nowadays and just be professional and get a survey done.
Yep. Yeah, I found when I increased, like, because I was charging designs, wasn't charging enough, and then when I increased the price of them, the higher the cost of the design, the bigger the budgets are for the landscaping project, and the better you can be at doing designs.
Yep.
Whereas if you charge a small amount, the people who are going to pay that amount for a design, they've got a small budget for their landscaping, and you can't do a good design when you're just filling in the basics, and then you've got no creativity to do anything interesting after that.
Absolutely right. And the other thing I find, the more you charge, the more respect you get from clients.
Yeah.
If you undervalue yourself, they're just going to treat you like dirt. But too many people undercharge.
Yeah.
I don't know how they survive financially.
Mm,
I think as an industry, we undercharge, really.
absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that it's when you put your prices up, you think, oh, people aren't going to pay that. And they do. And you put it up again, they keep paying it. So it's, yeah, because the price of everything else goes up. So why shouldn't our prices?
that's right. Yeah. And the other thing I do with clients is I don't like the idea of getting three quotes for a build on a job. Yeah. So I always say to a client, look, I'll connect you with the right contractor for this project. And I've never had an issue with that. Clients never questioned it. And I like that because I know if you get three quotes, you're wasting two contractors' time. And it's a lot of time, isn't it, to quote a project?
Yeah.
It's at least a full day of work for them sitting at a desk, itemizing everything and getting subcontractors quotes and materials prices and things like that. It's an enormous amount of work for them. And I think it's mean just to use two other quotes for the sake of having two other quotes. If you design properly and you document plans properly, a quote will be accurate. There's no need to get another quote, unless you're looking for the cheapest price. But if that's what a client's after, then I'm not the right designer for them anyway.
Yeah, it always ends badly in that. Like we just had a project where there was another subcontractor who, like, we recommended someone, and the client got someone else to quote it as well, and their guy was cheaper, and then it turned into a nightmare, and found out that the cheaper guys didn't have any work at the time, so they quoted it cheaper to get it, and then things went wrong. That they're losing money, so they're not doing things properly because they already know they're losing money, and
Yeah.
just yeah, it just goes from bad to worse.
Or they haven't allowed for certain things in the quote, which makes them appear cheaper. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
cheapest price is always alarm bells.
Yeah. Every now, like sometimes it's not because every now and then there's people who are just being a bit greedy. But
Yeah.
that's sort of the less likely to happen that way.
And I always say to clients, if they get it quoted and the cost is too high, we'll just work with that contractor about bringing the cost back down. We'll change some specification, change the paving material, and bring it back into budget. It's a much better way of handling it, I think, than getting multiple quotes.
Yeah. Last question for you, Jim, is who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
Well, so John Bott's built a lot of my gardens over the years. He's not on social media though,
Well,
but he went through Burnley in the early 90s. Terrific guy, really good contractor. He knows the industry very well. He's old school, like a handshake's a handshake.
yep.
I've got a lot of respect for him. As I say, we've done a lot of projects together. So you should try and reach out to John Bott one day, I reckon.
What's his business called?
Bott Landscapes,
All right.
BOTT.
I'll see if I can track him down. If I can't, I'll let you know.
All right, that sounds good, Joel.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. Absolutely fascinating chatting to you. And yeah, love the journey you've been on. And so thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks, Joel. I'll see you on the Ulleo courses, right?
Yeah, well.
What was that discount again?
Landscaping podcast. 400
Perfect.
bucks.
400 buck discount for Ulleo.
Australian dollars.
Thanks, Joel.